So, this is the first Intellitech Studios installment of something I've never done before, but yet so many other vacuum channels in the past have done. What is it that we're talking about? Well, I don't know if you can see me, first of all, but it's Vacuum of the Month. I know. What a novel concept, right? Something that I never did for the longest of time, primarily because I just didn't have the patience, hi Rocco, to use the same vacuum for an entire month. But the month of January, particularly, I said particularly, specific and in particularly, has been interesting because it's been a month where, I don't know, just been kind of, well, I like this machine. That's kind of the gist. And I've been using it as my daily, hi, hello potato, yes, hi. And I've been using this as my daily driver for the entire month of January, or at the very least, ever since I got it, which I don't remember what day I got it exactly, but it was sometime. Honestly, I don't think I put a video out in a legit month, or at least it feels like it's probably been close to that. I apologize. Not starting out 2025 very strongly. I probably already lost the subscriber challenge that I started with Parwas, but I don't know, I haven't checked. Hi Rocco. So I've been using this thing for about a month, maybe 3 weeks, I don't know. And whatever day I got it, I've been using it since then. I literally haven't used any other vacuum with the exception of, I used the V11 twice, and I used the V8 once to clean out my dryer lint trap. And that's it. I've used this for everything else. I've used this for the carpets, I've used this for the hard floors, and I've used this for everything in between. At least everything that I've cleaned. And yeah, so basically this thing has been packed full, just over full. I deliberately have not... Sir, what do you want? What do you want? You're buzzing. You're not. I'm not even doing anything, and you're buzzing. So this particular machine, I've overfilled, like drastically overfilled, because I deliberately did not want to empty this. And the fact is that I am due to vacuum my living room yet another time. So I don't even know if I necessarily want to empty this in this video, but I don't know, I haven't decided that yet. But either way, this thing I've been using, this vacuum I've been using for the last month, and I'm usually not a fan of canisters. In fact, some people even commented that whenever I first unboxed this. They're like, I thought you didn't like canisters. And the truth is I don't. Not usually. But something changed. I really hope I'm in frame because this is a good take and I really don't want to redo this. But something changed. This machine happened, and much in the same way that the Phantom Lightning also made me kind of change my opinion on canisters, at least for that specific machine. This machine also did. Shocker, right? Considering it's also basically a Dyson. This is literally a Dyson, and the Phantom Lightning is literally just a DC02 with the power head. So this thing is, of course, the DC21 Stowaway, the first proper Dyson canister that we got here in the United States, as the DC11 that came out before this in 2004 was never really popular here in the United States, as it had a very strange bin setup. It wasn't really all that well supported, as the uprights were significantly more popular, especially the DC07 and DC14, which were both out at the time. Well, DC14 came out right after, and it didn't have a power head. So for most people, it didn't make a lot of sense, because the vast majority of people in the early 2000s still had wall-to-wall carpeting, and for those that didn't, plenty of other options made more sense than something like a Dyson. The DC21 is Dyson's first attempt at in the US at least, of a proper power head canister. Because, I mean, technically, I believe this is Dyson's first motor head canister, I think. Now I'm thinking about that. I wonder, wasn't the DC12 motorized? But that was Japan only, so I don't really know. In the US, at least, this was the second Dyson canister and the first ever one with an electric power on the power nozzle. And here's that said electric power nozzle. Now, this particular machine is called the Stowaway, primarily because, well, you can stow it away. One of the big selling points, I don't know if I'm in frame. I really hope I'm in frame because I want to get this. Let me check the camera real quick. Okay, I think I was in frame, actually. At least most of me was. Okay, good enough. So, this is our power head. It's a very heavy, beefy power head. And as you can tell, I just sucked up a bunch of stuffing from a toy that Ruby had ate, and as you can tell, that tangled up the brush roll pretty bad. This thing, the gears are kind of loose, and it does rattle a little bit. You can see that I'm holding the second brush roll, and the first brush roll I'm moving a little bit. I don't know if that's proper or not. But you can see we've got most of the gasket still intact, other than a little bit of it chipped off right here. This gasket is intact. Or not gasket, this squeegee is mostly intact with the exception of this little bit right here. So I have used this on bare floors, and it's worked great on bare floors with the brush roll off, of course. These two bottom wheels are rubber coated and have a bit of side-to-side movements, and the main ball on the back is just a big piece of rubber. So it actually, and it's not reverting or anything. It's still in great condition. So all that is just fine. So now, while the front of this was completely covered in scratches, the bottom, ironically, is actually not very scratched, which is kind of funny. Of course, the edge of the base plate is scratched a little bit, as you'd expect for a 16-year-old machine. This machine is from 2008, and this machine was actually made in Canada. It's actually a Canadian model, which makes sense because my friend Will, known as Dual Cyclonic, resides in the lovely state of Michigan, which, of course, recently the Lake Michigan was so nicely renamed Lake Illinois by our governor. Quite nice. Anyways, so this particular machine came from Canada, which makes sense, close proximity to Michigan and all that. It actually has a Canadian serial number, so I wasn't able to activate the warranty on this until I made a Dyson Canada account and registered it there. While we're here, let's check on the filters. I'm doing everything out of order, but that's okay. The HEPA filter is pretty much the same as a DC07 and DC14, but it does not have a gasket. So we will see. Yeah, okay. So when I first got this machine, I ran it for a little bit without really looking at this filter, and I checked this filter, and there was coarse debris in here. There was sand, there was hair, there was some stuff on this filter and against this edge gasket. And I was kind of concerned that the filtration on this would be compromised. So what I did is I vacuumed that out, wiped it down, and this was probably, I want to say 2 weeks ago. And then I used it, every day for 2 weeks after that to see if the issue would replicate. And it did not. It appears to be clean this time around. So I'm not sure what the deal with that was. There was a point when this had coarse debris that had somehow gotten in the HEPA filter. I'm not sure if that's debris that fell in through the holes and worked its way underneath the filter, or if that's debris that was actually blown out of the exhaust. But as of now, after I cleaned that out and used it several times since then, it has not become an issue the second time around, so that's good at least. So that was one thing I was worried about. This is pretty much the first Dyson where the customer can just actively change the filter, which is a great feature. That's another thing that kind of makes this machine a lot nicer to use than some of the uprights. Because again, you've got that, it's a little bit more user-friendly in that regard, although this cover can be a little tricky to get on sometimes. It's a little, oh, I didn't like the sound that made. Oh, that's not good. So a piece of plastic just broke off. That's not fun. All right. Okay, well that wasn't fun. Oh goodness. Already breaking the Dyson. Oh, come on, please. Oh, apparently you're supposed to... There we go. That's what was... Oh god, well... Yeah, okay, so that... But on the bright side, this was a clean break, so I can epoxy that back on later, so that's not... So there's a little piece that cracked off right there just now. I'm glad we got that on film. I mean, these Dysons are usually pretty sturdy, but there's just random little bits that'll just become brittle and snap over time. Although, I don't think I'm going to blame it too much for that, because I kind of clamped down on that. And then here's our pre-motor filter, which, like a lot of Dysons, you have to put this filter in backwards. And there is debris in this filter, which is not ideal. Normally Dysons are supposed to be really good at pre-motor filter filtration just with the Cyclone pack, but this one, perhaps because of the wear that it's had over the years, it is struggling a little bit in that regard, but it's still doing its job. The inlet for the motor is still clean, and even the back side is still white. So that's fine, really. I mean, it's not ideal, but I mean, it's still better. Even a diminished Dyson, in terms of filtration, is still better than most cheap bagless vacuums on the market. So, and considering most of these are going to be used and relatively cheap anyways, this is still going to filter better than any other $100-something vacuum or $200 vacuum. So, I suppose it's not that bad in that regard. Now, it will fall flat when you compare it to a $600 vacuum, which I believe this was at the time. But nevertheless, it still did good. And look how much stuff. Like, this entire backside is filled all the way to the top. The shroud is covered in a couple spots. But this thing has just been a trooper. And it's been just fine. Obviously, with it being bagless, yet a canister, that means it's going to fill up way more quickly than an upright. Although, it's not as big of a difference as you would think. You know, stereotypically, it always felt like these were way smaller in terms of capacity than an upright. But it's about the same. You know, even if you compare it to like a DC24 or something, it's really not any different. In fact, this is probably a little bit bigger in capacity than like a DC24. Probably about the same as a DC25. And probably ever so slightly lower than a DC07 or DC14. But with the way that this curves, it's actually not that much of a drop off as you'd think. I also like how this hose right here is designed to be easily removable. It just sits in there with friction, and that helps clamp it down. I actually really like that feature. So, this power head comes off, and of course, one of the defining features of the Stowaway is the fact that it can, well, stow away. So, you take off the power head, you'd wrap the hose around this back channel, you would press this red button, and slide that in. Now, this was pretty stiff at first, but now that I've used it a bunch of times, it's actually loosened up quite a bit. Now, the hose swivels on this joint, so this part does not swivel, because this is the part that gets sucked into the handle when you expand the wand, but this part is where you do all your swiveling. It was a little awkward at first, but I got used to it. See, and then you just wrap it around the channels, and right where that little edge is on the bin, right there, you just hook it in there. And then from there, you slap the power head on the dock on the back, and there's your entire machine. Nice and stowed away, hence the name. It's kind of nice to keep it out of the way this way. One thing that annoys me is the cord is incredibly short. You've got a 15-foot cord, and honestly, that's, on a vacuum that was this expensive, that's ridiculous. Because, I mean, that's, Abyssal Power Force is, 23 feet, and, some of the more expensive Power Forces, like the $80 Power Forces, are around 25 feet. And I've complained about any cord that's less than 30. I feel like 30 is the standard minimum. Now, granted, with a canister, and I'm sure this was Dyson's logic also, there's not very much space for the cord rewind. Their logic as well, since you have the hose, basically the machine is in between the area where an upright would be. And, where the cord would be on an upright if you're trying to reach something all the way off to the other end of the room. And that makes sense, honestly, given the fact that this obviously is a canister, and the hose on this does get pretty long, especially whenever you have it in the collapsed mode and you're trying to reach down into a corner. It's not bad, actually. So I've learned to live with it, but usually 99 times out of 100, I just have this plugged into extension cord anyways. Dyson obviously doesn't recommend that, but if you are going to run an extension cord with any vacuum, you need to make sure your extension cord is actually rated to take the wattage and the amperage of the machine you're using. You need to make sure that your extension cord is rated to at least 16 amps, because most of these vacuums are around 12, some are around 8. You want to make sure it's actually rated to be a 16 amp power cord, because usually they're less than 16 or over 16. make sure that the extension cord you use is actually rated for a greater amperage, and ideally double the amperage of what your machine is, so you can make sure there's no heat and no risk of a fire or anything crazy like that. So now there is a little bit of slack because the hose seems to be ever so slightly longer than the channels kind of lead you to believe, but that's a good thing because it means there's a bit more slack here. And this thing isn't as tight in here, which makes me, you know, less worried about it breaking. I'm honestly very surprised that this channel on the top of the bin has not broken or snapped, but it is actually held in with a screw. Like if you actually look in there, the channel is actually held on with a Torx screw. So in theory, if Dyson still made this part available, you could replace it. Now obviously they don't. They don't make any parts for this machine available because that would make them a good company. But in theory, that's replaceable. So of course, when I first got, just like any old Dyson, when I first got this machine, I was really careful and really worried and really, you know, panicked that I would break something. And minus just now, you know, I've never had it actually be an issue. And I never really worried about it too much because when you're just using the thing, it, you know, you just don't worry about it. This thing's already got scratches on it and it's not really brittle. I mean, I'm not going to call this thing brittle because I had tried to slam the filter door on when it was not lined up correctly. So I'm not going to blame the machine for that. But one thing, this would be a good segue where I would be like, oh, well, one thing I am going to blame the machine for, but not necessarily, because honestly there's, hi Rubes, there's honestly plenty of things that I like about this. Now, like I mentioned, the power head is kind of heavy, but I mean, can you really complain? It's got a motor in it. The motor is exactly the same as what you'd find in a DC17, which makes sense because the Rocco, he's underneath the couch. What was I saying? The children keep distracting me. Ruby, you keep distracting me. I'm trying to do a video. This is the first video I've done in weeks, and you're ruining it. What? Oh, really? You want to go outside? I'm literally filming a video right now. All right. She'll have to wait. Anyways, so, oh, potato. So one thing that's interesting about this machine are the tools. Now this machine thankfully has all the tools, and they all store back here in this very small section behind the machine, right where the power head stores. But these clamps, these little clips, somehow haven't broken, but they are pretty stretched. And we've got 3 onboard tools. We've got this dusting brush, which is pretty much identical to the DC17. We've got this crevice tool, which again is pretty much identical to the DC17. Don't actually, hold on, before you comment, I'm going to get to that. And we have this upholstery tool, which it reminds me of some kind of Dyson, but I don't remember, like, I thought there was some Dyson with air vent holes like this. Probably some other canister, but this, we'll get to this upholstery tool in a minute. Now, I mentioned, these look like DC17 tools, but they're actually, in terms of fitting, they're DC15 tools. This crevice tool is the exact same crevice tool that's on a DC15. It's the exact same fitting. This dusting brush, it's shaped like a DC17 dusting brush, but it has the fitting of a DC15. Same with this upholstery tool. But here's the interesting thing. If you remember my DC15 review, I mentioned that the DC15 is the first Dyson to actually support the new generation of Dyson attachments. The current generation that here in the United States is still used on the current generation Ball Animal 3. Which means the articulating hard floor tool, the tangle-free turbine, the groom tool, all of those attachments fit on this machine perfectly. They are the exact same fitting as the original tools that this machine came with. Also the same, again, as the DC15. But unlike the DC15, Although I think there's like one or two versions out there that are dark, that are the dark shade like these are. Most of these actually match. And the thing is that just like the DC15, these are friction fit. So these just fit onto the end of the hose. Now here's the thing. You have to have this wand. There is no way to remove the hose from this mechanism. This wand is about... this is like the equivalent of 2 thistle wands being built in, like on a older style Power Force. So that is the unfortunate part, is that if you want to dust in a tight area, you've got to deal with this big giant brick, and that is probably the worst aspect of this machine, is that it does make, for example, using the crevice tool, a little bit awkward. Now the crevice tool is a little loose on here, but the dusting brush fits on here perfectly, probably because they hardly use it. And again, I've got aminals in the way. There's a potato and there's a sausage, and they're interrupting the video, but that's okay because they're cute. Now here's the thing. This means, again, because these are friction fit, that means the current generation of Dyson attachments also fits perfectly, including the articulating hard floor tool, tangle-free turbine. I already said all this, but that's great because it means you do not need any sort of adapter to use current generation Dyson tools. So if you have tools from a modern Dyson canister, a modern Dyson upright, I guess not the newest Dyson canister, but a semi-modern Dyson canister, and every Dyson upright from the DC25 up until today, at least here in the United States, where they haven't changed the tool connectors on the upright yet, these do fit, and the newer ones also fit. So that's great. What does that mean in English? That you've got a super big attachment ecosystem for modern Dyson, and you can use that on this. This articulating hard floor tool, which I have a ton of these, so obviously I'm using the one that's in the worst condition because it's already scratched. But this has been amazing for hard floors. I'm not kidding. This has been amazing for hard floors. Using this tool on hard floors with this wand and being able to swivel all over the place, super smooth, it's been absolutely fantastic. And I love the articulating hard floor tool on this machine. Now the wand being metal, you would think would be an issue, but it's actually not. The main issue was just the hose tugging on it in a certain direction, and because this doesn't click into place because it's friction fit, that would mean that if the hose pulls on it in a certain angle, it would kind of pull it in a certain way, and then I have to readjust it, which got a little annoying. But other than that, it was great. So dusting brush, bristles can be a bit softer, but that's great, and I used that not too much, but I used it a little bit. Rocco, get down. You're damaging that toe. Rocco. There you go, buddy. Now the crevice tool. People, now I'm tired of this. Even people that like Dyson tend to slander this crevice tool. And it needs to stop. This is an amazing crevice tool. And frankly, this is the best part of a lot of Dysons. Because it can fit into areas with that subtle curve. It can fit into areas that other crevice tools can't fit into. And again, this supports the modern Dyson attachments, so you can easily use a modern Dyson crevice tool from a Ball Animal 2 or Animal 3 if you so choose. So there's no drawbacks to having this. And that, of course, again, just clips on the back. Now this upholstery tool, I said I was going to get back to this, and I did. I am now. This is the best upholstery tool to ever be on any Dyson. It's the exact right size. It has the slight air bleed holes on the side, just like the DC04 that we never got in the States, and just like the bigger mattress tool, but then it also has air bleed holes on the top. And unlike the air bleed holes on the DC07 and DC14, these air bleed holes actually work. They actually do what they're supposed to do. This tool is the best Dyson upholstery tool that exists. The one for the Dyson DC21 Stowaway. This is the best upholstery tool for any Dyson, at least any one that's direct from Dyson. Now, the mattress tool in general is my preference because it's bigger, but as far as an actual upholstery tool, or a stair tool as Dyson calls it, this is the best. The best Dyson upholstery tool ever. And the nice thing is is that you can use this. Well, in theory, you can use this on a modern Dyson. I haven't actually tried this on a modern Dyson yet, but in theory, you can use this. I actually don't know. Let's test that. Let's actually test that theory real quick, because I'm actually curious. Let's see if these work on a modern Dyson. All right, so here is a ball animal 2. Let's see if the 21 attachments fit. Well, may have spoken too soon. So they kind of fit, but the little click lock gets in the way. That sucks. Yeah, they kind of fit, but they're not. The upholstery tool kind of fits. And the dusting brush. The brush actually fits the best. They do kind of fit, to be fair. You could probably make it work. But you can tell they're not really designed to work. What about the hose? What about this nice stained hose? Kind of a similar story there. The little lock gets in the way. Otherwise, it would fit perfectly. So crevice tool's kind of loose. Upholstery tool's kind of loose. Dusting brush is kind of loose. That wasn't even in frame. Dusting brush is kind of loose. So yeah, DC21 attachments don't really fit on modern Dysons. I kind of jumped the gun on that. I thought they would work, but the actual click lock gets in the way, which is unfortunate. But of course, we put this back together. And of course, I had to knock the cord down. If we take the tools off this and point this back down, we can see that if you hated this tiny crevice tool, look at that big crevice tool, look at that giant crevice tool, and look at that, it fits. Oh. Look at that, it fits. You got yourself a big crevice tool. Same with the upholstery tool. You got yourself a modern upholstery tool. So, and obviously that brush that goes on crevice tool. So yeah, that's great. But the, of course, all the tools store on the back. Click on. The clips are really loose, but they still hold. There we go. And this floor tool is awesome, and it works. So yeah, I don't really know if there's much else to say about this. I know I kind of rambled on about the attachments for a while, but this thing I really liked over the past month or so that I've been using it. And honestly, I really wish this thing was still available, because to tell you the truth, this is still a fantastic vacuum. And honestly, this was a great platform. This really was. I don't really understand why Dyson chose to get away from the Stowaway platform. I'm like, when it comes to the other decisions they made with like their uprights and stuff, I can kind of understand. I can kind of understand them wanting to make the ball a standard feature and go to the slimmer design. You know, these newer designs are generally more durable than the older ones, and despite having more flex, they tend to be, you know, a lot stronger despite using less plastic. That all makes sense. As much as I have my grievances with this design, it makes sense, you know, why they would choose to go that route. Plus, if it did break more often, that makes them more money. But this was great. Honestly, I'm not going to say it was perfect. I don't like the fact that I couldn't use the hose by itself. That's something that, of course, was fixed with the DC26, which was a compact canister that I do still own. But this particular DC21, in addition to it being orange, which orange is a great color, just ask Rocco. Hi. Orange is a great color, and it's the only model that this comes in. There is no DC21 all floors, DC21 animal, DC21 full kit, total clean access, target red, none of that. It's just the DC21 Stowaway. It's the Dyson Stowaway DC21. That's all it is. This did technically come with its own version of a hard floor tool back in the day, but of course I don't have that. I only have the onboard tools. Everyone lost that, of course. But this tool is probably much better anyways, the way it articulates and goes in every direction. There are some Wesselwerk floor tools that are very similar to this, and you can see there's a lot of hair that got caught in its bristles, so I'm not going to sit here and say it's perfect, but for getting up dog food off the floor, they slide in the gates perfectly, and this thing just glides. It goes in between the fridges and between the cabinets and all that, so it's great. So I'm singing a lot of praises of this machine, even though I have complaints of it. It's overall just, it's one of my favorite Dysons now, to tell you the truth. And to be honest, you know, I've seen some of Dyson's later offerings, like the DC39, and this just seems like much in the same way the DC17 from the exact same time was kind of revered as is revered the right word? It was kind of remembered as the best Dyson upright. The DC21, I feel like, by most accounts, gets the exact same recognition for being the best canister, and it makes sense. The DC22 was a fascinating machine that used Dyson's digital motor, but of course that machine's particularly rare, and most of the time you're not going to find one of those here in the States. I would love to get my hands on one someday. The DC26, probably one of the most common Dyson canisters, strangely enough. I love that machine. And this thing kind of takes that and just turns it up to 11. This obviously came first, but you know, while it doesn't have a trap door for the bin, you have to actually dump out the bin the old-fashioned way, much like the DC04. It just overall is a fantastic machine. Despite it not having any goofy ball or anything on the machine itself and relying on the power head for that, this thing manages to maneuver kind of well. Now, like a lot of canisters, my complaints are pretty similar. This design of having the thing follow you is great and all until it gets stuck on something. You have to exert way more force to pull it from wherever it's stuck from than simply pushing it upright. So while the wand, and again, this is kind of my complaint with every canister, while using the wand by itself and just having the weight of the hose and the canister rolling behind you is nice and easy, when you have to pull on it, that inconsistency makes it in practice sometimes, at least on carpet, more annoying to use than an upright. And this really does exacerbate the difference, because when I'm using this on hard floors with the articulating floor tool, this thing is a breeze. On carpets, though, it's still a bit more hassle than an upright. So canisters, in my opinion, really shine if you have primarily hard floors or a mix of both and your machine's geared more towards one or the other. So for me, this machine, you know, still makes plenty of sense, even though I have plenty of carpet, because there's enough hard floor to at least justify this machine. Although I do go through the effort of switching heads. Even though a lot of times I think switching heads is a waste of time and machines that make you do it are often annoying, for this machine, it's actually worth it. Although I don't like to leave the power head on the machine while I'm pulling it, because the edge of it will drag and get caught on things. So, I've been ranting for long enough. This is my 1 month of using the Dyson DC21 Stowaway. I don't know if there's anything else I should talk about. I feel like this kind of blended into kind of a review of the Dyson Stowaway. And for those wondering, if you're watching this in the UK, the Stowaway name was given to the previous generation DC21, which I don't believe was a powerhead model, but I could be wrong. And the DC21 in the UK was called the Motorhead because it had a motorized brush compared to the DC20 and the DC19. Here in the States, we didn't get any of those. We just got the DC21, so they made it count. It's the Stowaway, but it's also the Motorhead. It does both. And frankly, this is really the only model you need of the three. I feel like the DC19, DC20, DC21 are all kind of superfluous. The DC21 is clearly the main machine of those three. And in reality, this is basically, just an updated version of the DC08T, because in the UK there was a DC08 and a DC08T. The 08T introduced the telescope wrap feature, which here in the United States we didn't get until the DC21, and we called it the Stowaway. But this is kind of a DC08, but with a power head and some more tweaks. But I don't know the tweaks because I don't have a DC08, because I don't live in the UK. So, anyways, Intellitech Studios signing out. Subscribe to Intellitech Studios for more crap like this. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe. And let me know what videos you want me to see next. What? I said that wrong. Let me know what videos you want to see and you want me to make next. I don't know. Either way, this is a good machine. I like it.